She thought she was just returning a jacket left in the rain. She had no idea she was handing it to a man who controlled a $2 billion empire, and that her simple act of honesty would unravel them both. Her name was Amara, a freelance illustrator just trying to get home. His name was Yi-Won, a reclusive tech titan whose every move was calculated. In that moment, under a flickering street lamp, their two radically different worlds collided. But what happens when a single, selfless gesture pierces the armor of a man who trusts no one? To understand the seismic shift this one act would cause, you have to understand the two lives it connected. Amara's world was one of quiet hustle and fading light. At 26, she was a freelance illustrator whose entire business lived on a single tablet and in the cloud. Her apartment was a 500-square-foot studio in a neighborhood that was rapidly gentrifying around her. Every month was a calculation between rent, student loans, and the inconsistent income from clients who often paid late. Her life was built on a foundation of polite follow-up emails, and hopping the check was truly in the mail. The night she found the jacket, she was walking home from a coffee shop where she'd spent 3 hours refining storyboards for a children's book that paid just enough to cover one of those looming bills. The rain wasn't romantic to her. It was a cold inconvenience soaking through her sneakers. She almost didn't see the garment, a beautifully tailored overcoat of charcoal wool draped over the bench at her usual bus stop. It was too expensive to leave. Someone was definitely panicking. Meanwhile, in a penthouse overlooking the same city, Yi-Won was concluding a board meeting via holographic display. At 32, he was the founder and CEO of Ethelgard Industries, a tech conglomerate specializing in private security algorithms and data sovereignty. His net worth was estimated at $2.3 billion, but his public persona was a ghost. No social media, no interviews, just a sleek corporate website and a reputation for ruthless, precision-driven success. His personal life was a fortress. He trusted a circle of 3 people: his childhood friend and chief of security, Min-soo, his elderly house manager, and his sister, who lived in Seoul. To everyone else, he was an impenetrable wall of calculated silence. The overcoat was a favorite not for its price, but because his sister had gifted it to him the last time he visited home. Losing it felt like a profound, personal system failure. He had retraced his steps mentally, a cold anger settling in his gut. The driver had been reprimanded, the security detail reviewed. The loss was a vulnerability, a tiny crack in the perfect control he demanded of his world. Amara didn't look for a label. The fabric was too fine, the cut too perfect for some generic brand. Instead, tucked in an inner pocket, she found a small, engraved silver card case. It held a single business card, stark white with only a name, Yi-Won Kim, and a phone number with a prestigious Manhattan exchange. No title, no company logo. The austerity of it screamed money. Most people, faced with such an anonymous totem of wealth, might have shrugged, left it with the bus company, or even sold the coat. But Amara was raised by a grandmother who believed in what she called the currency of conscience. You did the right thing not for reward, but because your peace of mind was the real treasure. So, shivering in her damp jacket, she pulled out her phone and sent a simple text to the number. "I found a charcoal overcoat at the bus stop on Grand and 7th. There's a card case inside with this name. If it's yours, I can leave it with the station manager." The reply came in under 60 seconds. "Do not leave it. Where are you right now?" The tone was commanding, devoid of pleasantries. It put her on edge. She texted back her cross street, half expecting a car to screech up. Instead, the next message read, "Remain there. I am 4 minutes away." The rain had slowed to a mist, wrapping the streetlights in halos. Amara waited, the expensive wool heavy over her arm, and then she saw him. He emerged from the gloom not in a luxury car but on foot, his silhouette tall and unmistakably tense. He wore a navy suit, no overcoat, his shirt dampened by the fine rain. Up close, he was younger than she'd imagined, with a sharp, intelligent face and an intensity in his eyes that felt like a physical pressure. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze flickering from her face to the coat and back. "You texted," he said. It wasn't a question. Amara held it out. "This is yours, I assume." He took it, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact was brief, cold. He didn't put it on. Instead, he examined it minutely, checking the inner pocket, the seams, as if verifying its authenticity. "Why?" he asked suddenly, his eyes locking onto hers. "Why did you contact me? The coat is worth more than you likely make in a month." The bluntness was jarring, almost offensive. Amara felt a spark of defiance. "'Cause it wasn't mine," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's that simple." For a long moment he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. He seemed to be processing her not as a person but as a data point that contradicted his core algorithms. The simple honesty didn't compute. Finally, he gave a single, shallow nod. "Thank you." He turned to leave, then paused. "Your name?" "Amara," she offered, unsure why she did. He repeated it once quietly, as if testing the sound. Then, without another word, he disappeared back into the rainy night, the coat over his arm. Amara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The odd encounter left her feeling unsettled, but she shrugged it off as another strange New York moment. She went home, made tea, and tried to forget the intensity of his stare. For her, the chapter was closed. A good deed done. But in the back seat of a Rolls-Royce now gliding through the city, Yi-Won sat perfectly still, the recovered coat beside him. He stared at his phone, at the brief text thread with an unknown number. The simplicity of her motive was an anomaly in his world of complex incentives and hidden agendas. He had built an empire predicting human behavior, greed, fear, ambition. He had no predictive model for a selfless act with zero expectation of gain. It was a glitch. And in Yi-Won's experience, glitches either revealed systemic flaws or presented unforeseen opportunities. "Min-Soo," he said into the car, quiet. "I need a background check, minimal footprint. The number that just texted me. I want to know who she is." He ended the call and looked out at the wet streets. The coat was back, but the cold, ordered equilibrium of his life now had a hairline fracture, and it was all because of a woman named Amara who believed in the currency of conscience. The report on Amara Reed landed on Yi-Won's desk in under 12 hours. Min-Soo, ever efficient, had compiled a dossier that was both thorough and disquieting. 26, freelance illustrator, BFA from a reputable state school, buried under $60,000 in student debt. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. Her financials were a masterclass in precarious survival. Her income over the last year fluctuated wildly from a high of $4,000 in a good month to a devastating low of $800. She lived in a rent-stabilized walk-up, her biggest monthly expense after loans. Her digital footprint was professional, almost naive, a portfolio site, a few earnest social media posts about her work. There was no hidden agenda, no secret leverage, just talent, hustle, and quiet struggle. The most notable entry was a guardianship noted at age 14 after her grandmother's passing. She had aged out of the system. She was, in every quantifiable sense, alone. Yi-Won read the file twice. The data painted a picture of vulnerability, yet her act had been one of unassailable strength. The contradiction bothered him. It was an equation that refused to balance. For Amara, life snapped back to its normal rhythm of deadlines and anxiety. The strange man in the rain faded into a curious anecdote. That is, until a week later, when a courier arrived at her studio apartment with a large, flat box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a breathtaking set of limited edition, professional-grade digital art pens and a tablet screen protector she once wistfully saved in an online cart. There was no note, only a receipt from a high-end art supply store with the order number blacked out. Her heart hammered. It had to be him. The value was staggering, over $2,000 worth of equipment she could never justify. Her first instinct was panic. This felt like payment, and her act hadn't been for sale. Her second was a giddy, overwhelming thrill. These tools could change her work, her speed, her quality. The war between her principles and her ambition raged for an hour. In the end, she sent a text to the only number she had. "Did you send this?" The reply was instantaneous. "A tool should not be the bottleneck for talent. It is not a reward, it is an optimization." She stared at the words optimization like she was a project. She didn't know whether to be insulted or seen. She typed back, "It's too much. I can't accept this." His response was final. "It is already purchased. Not accepting it is an inefficient waste of resources. Use them." Yi-Won monitored the delivery confirmation. He told himself it was a logical experiment, a test of her character. Would she sell the gifts? Would she demand cash instead? Her conflicted gratitude and her attempt to refuse were more anomalous data. He found himself pulling up the building schematics for her address. The security was non-existent. The fire escape access was a joke. He ran a passive digital scan on her primary email, flagging for phishing attempts or malware. It was a trivial task for his systems. He told Min-Soo it was a routine vulnerability assessment for a potential soft target in a building near a corporate asset. Min-Soo didn't question it, but his silence was pointed. Yi-Won was investing attention, a currency he never spent lightly. The real escalation began with a client. Amara had been working for months on illustrations for a startup wellness brand. The founder, a charismatic man named Leo, had been increasingly demanding, blurring professional lines with late-night calls and offhand compliments about her appearance. The final invoice for $5,000 was now 60 days overdue. Her polite emails were ignored. Her gentle calls went to voicemail. When she finally sent a firm demand, the reply was a legal threat, accusing her of missing deadlines and delivering substandard work, a blatant lie. He was gaslighting her, counting on her need for a good reference to keep her quiet. That $5,000 was her rent buffer, her loan payment, her survival. The despair that hit her was familiar, a cold weight in her stomach. She was good at her craft, but terrible at defending it from predators. Sitting on her floor surrounded by the obscenely expensive gifts from a stranger, she felt like a fraud. The fancy tools couldn't fix a world where people like Leo just took what they wanted. Yi-Won's monitoring systems flagged the email chain. The aggressive legal language from Leo Henderson, Veritas Wellness, against Amara's increasingly desperate replies appeared as a minor conflict alert. He read the exchange, his expression hardening. This was a familiar pattern of exploitation, the strong manipulating the weak through fear and bureaucracy. He saw it in corporate takeovers, in patent trolling, in the way his own father had conducted business. A cold, clean anger settled in him. This was within his domain. He didn't contact Amara. Instead, he had Min-Soo dig. Leo Henderson's Veritas Wellness was a house of cards. The company was bleeding money, surviving on inflated investor reports and bullying small vendors into silence. More damningly, Leo had a history of sexual harassment claims settled with non-disclosure agreements at a previous firm. Yi-Won compiled the financial discrepancies and the witness statements from the silenced former employees into a concise, anonymous package. He then had it delivered, not to Leo, but to the lead investor of Veritas Wellness's latest funding round, a notoriously risk-averse venture capitalist known for cutting ties at the first sign of scandal. The package arrived at 7 a.m. on a Monday. By noon, Leo was in a panic, his funding suddenly frozen pending an internal review. By 5 p.m., a bank transfer for $7,000, the original invoice plus penalties, hit Amara's account with a terse memo. Final settlement. Amara stared at the notification on her phone, stunned. The conflict had evaporated, the money was there. Leo's company website went offline 2 days later. She felt no triumph, only a deep, unnerving confusion. It was too clean, too sudden. A coincidence was impossible. The only person who knew the specifics was the man who had sent her the art supplies, the man who had run a background check. The realization was a cold trickle down her spine. He was watching. Not just kindly, but intrusively. He had intervened in her life with the terrifying efficiency of a god solving an ant's problem. She felt a surge of violated anger, followed immediately by a shameful wave of relief. She was safe and paid because a billionaire had decided to play guardian angel. She didn't know whether to scream or cry. She chose confrontation. This time she didn't text. She called the number. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm. "Amara, Did you do something to Leo? She demanded, dispensing with pleasantries. There was a pause. The client who refused to pay you, I am aware his business is undergoing restructuring. That's not an answer. Did you do something? Yi-Won considered lying. It would be easier. But her voice held a raw honesty that demanded its match. I provided information to a relevant party. The outcome was a function of his own poor decisions. You ruined him. I corrected an imbalance, he stated, his tone devoid of emotion. He exploited a power differential. I reversed it. You have your payment. The system is now efficient. Amara was silent, grappling with the sheer scale of his casual power. I didn't ask for this. You asked for what you were owed, he corrected. The method was incidental. Do you regret the result? She couldn't say yes. The money in her account was a lifeline. Her pride warred with her practicality, and practicality born of a lifetime of scarcity won. No, she whispered, I don't. Then the matter is closed, he said, and she could almost hear the finality of a ledger being shut. But then he added softer, your work is good, Amara. You should not be undermined by poor counterparts. The compliment, delivered like a factual report, disarmed her completely. The call ended, leaving her more unsettled than before. Yi-Won ended the call and stood at his panoramic window. His reflection in the glass showed a man in complete control. But internally, the equation was growing more complex. Helping her had not been a strategic calculation. It had been an impulse, a visceral reaction to an injustice that echoed something deeper, older. It was about his sister, Mina. He never spoke of her. 7 years ago, Mina, a bright, passionate journalism student, had been relentlessly bullied by a professor who stole her research ideas and used his academic authority to crush her when she protested. She had come to Yi-Won, then a rising star in the tech world, her spirit broken. He offered to intervene with the cold efficiency he used now. She had refused. She wanted to fight her own battle, to win on principle. A month later, she took her own life. The professor faced no consequences. Yi-Won had all the power in the world, and he had failed to use it when it mattered most because he respected her pride. He vowed never to make that mistake again. Seeing Amara being crushed by a Leo Henderson triggered that old, festering failure. This time, he would not stand on ceremony. This time, he would act. Amara was not Mina, but in protecting her, he was trying to rewrite a history he could never change. Their lives began to orbit each other with a strange, gravitational pull. He never approached her directly again, but his presence was felt. When her building's landlord tried an illegal rent hike targeting tenants without leases, every resident received a notice from a non-profit tenant rights group offering pro bono legal support. The landlord backed down within a week. When a phishing scam nearly compromised her bank account, her security software she didn't remember buying, quarantined the attack and flagged it with absurd specificity. Amara knew, she just knew. It was both terrifying and addictive. For the first time in her adult life, someone was silently, impossibly holding back the chaos of the world. She started to look for him. She took walks past the sleek, anonymous tower she'd identified as Ethelgard Industries headquarters. She never saw him. But one evening, leaving a grocery store, she felt a familiar prickle on the back of her neck. She turned. Across the street, under the awning of a closed gallery, stood Yi-Won. He wasn't looking at her. He was speaking quietly into his phone, his profile sharp against the stone. As if sensing her gaze, he slowly turned his head. Their eyes met through the evening crowd and traffic. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He simply held her look for 3 long seconds, then turned away, dissolving into the shadow of the building. It was not an accident. It was a confirmation. He was there. He was always in some way there. This bizarre, silent guardianship might have continued indefinitely, a strange new normal, were it not for a package that arrived not for Amara but for Yi-Won. It was delivered to his corporate office, bypassing his usual security channels. Inside was a single, blown-up photograph. It showed Amara, taken from a distance, leaving her apartment building. A red laser sight dot had been crudely photoshopped over her heart. Scrawled across the bottom in block letters were the words, "Everything has a price, even your attention." It was signed with a single initial, L. Leo. He hadn't just faded away. He had connected the dots. He knew who had ruined him, and he had found what he thought was Yi-Won's new vulnerability. The threat was amateurish, but the intent was clear. Yi-Won's world of shadows and data had just violently collided with Amara's world of light and art. And in doing so, it had painted a target directly on her back. The photograph was a declaration of war on Yi-Won's most sacred principle, control. But Leo had made a fatal error. He had assumed Yi-Won's interest in Amara was a weakness to be exploited, not a line in the sand. In Yi-Won's world, there were rules. Disputes were settled through proxies, data, or financial ruin. You did not threaten the physical safety of someone under his protection. It was a barbaric escalation, and it unlocked a part of Yi-Won he kept meticulously caged. He didn't panic. He went preternaturally still. He summoned Min-Su to his office and placed the photograph on the desk between them. "Find him," Yi-Won said, his voice a low monotone. "I don't care what resources it takes. I want his location, his assets, his allies, and his current mental state within 4 hours. And I want a protective detail on Amara Reed. Invisible. If she so much as trips on a curb, I will hold you personally responsible." Min-Su, for the first time in their long partnership, looked wary. "Yi-Won, this is becoming personal. It's a risk vector we haven't accounted for." Yi-Won's eyes were black ice. It stopped being a vector the moment he sent this. It is now a containment and elimination protocol. Execute it. Meanwhile, Amara remained blissfully unaware of the photograph. But the air around her had changed. She noticed the new man reading a newspaper in her lobby who never seemed to turn a page. She spotted the same nondescript sedan parked at different ends of her block. The sense of silent guardianship had morphed into something tighter, more suffocating. She felt like a doll in a glass case. Her anger at the violation began to simmer, overpowering her gratitude. She was done being a passive element in Yi-Won's equations. She needed to look him in the eye and understand the rules of this terrifying game she'd been drafted into. She didn't call. She took the subway to the financial district, walked into the soaring marble lobby of the Ethelgard Tower, and approached the security desk. "I need to see Yi-Won Kim," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. The guard, impeccably dressed, didn't laugh. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. Tell him Amara is here." "I'm not leaving." She expected to be escorted out. Instead, the guard spoke softly into his headset, his eyes never leaving her. A minute later, a private elevator door sighed open. "Please," was all the guard said. The elevator opened directly into Yi-Won's private office. The room was a temple to minimalism and power, all cool grays, live data streams glowing on one wall, and that impossible view. Yi-Won stood not behind his desk, but in the center of the room, waiting. He looked different, not in suit, but in a black turtleneck and trousers, his posture coiled. "This was unwise," he said, no greeting. "You shouldn't have come here." "Why?" "Because it messes up your surveillance logs." Amara shot back, walking further in. "I'm done, Yi-Won. Done with the gifts, done with the mysterious help, done with the feeling that I'm being followed. What is happening? Who are you really protecting me from?" He studied her, assessing her fear and her courage. He made a decision. He walked to his desk, picked up the photograph, and handed it to her. "This arrived yesterday." Amara's blood turned to slush. The image of herself, the crude red dot, the message, her hands trembled. "Leo," she breathed, "he knows it was you." "Yes, and he's threatening to kill me to get to you. The threat is empty, his capability is negligible, his judgment, however, is extinct." Yi-Won's calm was terrifying. "So what happens now?" Amara asked, the photo fluttering in her grip. "Now he is removed as a variable." The finality in his tone was absolute. It wasn't a promise of arrest. It was a statement of erasure. Amara finally understood the true nature of the man before her. This wasn't just a tech billionaire. This was a sovereign power. You can't just make people disappear." "Can't I?" he replied, a chilling simplicity in the question. "The world is a system, Amara. I correct system errors." She saw it then, the shadow behind the brilliant mind, the part of him that viewed human conflict as a code to be rewritten. The part that had likely done things far darker than ruining a startup. She should have run. Instead, a strange calm settled over her. She was already in the deep end. "What's your plan?" she heard herself ask. Her pragmatic response, her lack of hysterics, surprised him. It was the same clear-eyed strength she'd shown returning the coat. He laid it out, not as a reassurance but as a briefing. Minsu has located him. He's hiding in a borrowed cabin upstate, thinking he's clever. He's been reaching out to old contacts, trying to hire muscle, selling what's left of his company to fund his revenge. He's a buzzing insect. By this time tomorrow, he will be in federal custody on charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, and making interstate threats. The evidence is already compiled. He will spend a very long time contemplating his choices. And that's it. That is the cleanest resolution. It maintains order. Amara looked at the photograph again, then at Yi-Won. You're not doing this just for order. You're doing it because of your sister, aren't you? The heir left the room. Yi-Won's mask of impassive control didn't crack, it shattered. A raw, unguarded shock flashed across his face, followed by a pain so profound it was almost physical. He took an involuntary step back. What did you say? Amara pressed on, guided by instinct. The way you talk about correcting imbalances, protecting people who can't fight the system, it's personal, it's not just business efficiency, someone you couldn't protect. Yi-Won turned his back to her, staring out at the city, his shoulders rigid. The silence stretched for a full minute. When he spoke, his voice was stripped bare, unfamiliar. Her name was Mina. She was my younger sister. A man in a position of authority broke her spirit. I offered to fix it. She refused my help. She wanted to win her own way. He paused, the memory a weight in the room. She didn't win, and I honored her pride over her safety. It was the worst calculation of my life. He turned to face Amara, his eyes haunted. So you see, you are incorrect. This is not about you. It is about a debt I owe to a ghost. A debt I will spend my life repaying by ensuring no one else fails to act when they have the power to do so. The confession was devastating in its honesty. Amara saw the man beneath the empire, not a monster, but a grieving brother trapped in a fortress of his own making, using unimaginable power to atone for a single powerlessness moment. Her anger dissolved, replaced by a painful empathy. I'm not Mina, Amara said softly, and I'm not asking you to fix everything, but I am asking you not to treat me like a variable in your atonement algorithm. If we're in this, I need to be in the room, not in the dark. Yi-Won looked at her, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time. He saw not a vulnerability to be managed, but a partner in the chaos. He gave a single, slow nod. Very well. The coordinated takedown of Leo proceeded with military precision, just as Yi-Won had outlined. Federal agents arrested him at the upstate cabin at dawn. The evidence package was so comprehensive it left his lawyers speechless. It was over. But as Yi-Won's team monitored the aftermath, a new signal appeared. A financial trace. A payment from one of Leo's drained accounts, made just before his arrest, to a shell corporation registered in Singapore. That corporation was a known financial conduit for a rival of Yi-Won, Victor Chen, the head of a competing data syndicate based in Macau. Chen and Yi-Won had a long, cold history of encroaching on each other's territories. It was a business rivalry, hostile but contained. The payment was small, insignificant, but its existence was a flare. Leo hadn't just been a lone, vengeful idiot. Someone had pointed him at Yi-Won. Someone had maybe even encouraged his reckless threat. Leo was the bullet, but Victor Chen had likely sighted the gun. The threat hadn't been eliminated. It had just changed shape, becoming larger, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Yi-Won's personal entanglement with Amara was no longer a secret vulnerability. It was now intelligence in the hands of a strategic enemy. Yi-Won stood before his wall of data streams, the new information glowing before him. The clean resolution was now contaminated. He had acted to protect Amara from a mosquito, only to reveal her existence to a wolf. The calculus of the situation had just been rewritten. Protecting her now meant engaging in a shadow war he had meticulously avoided for years. Letting her go was impossible. Chen would already have her profile. She was, through Yi-Won's own actions, irrevocably in the game. He had two choices: distance her completely, erase her digitally and physically, sending her into a protected oblivion, or bring her fully into the fold, turn the perceived weakness into a fortified position. He thought of her standing in his office, demanding to be in the room. He knew which choice she would make, and for the first time he considered that the logical choice might also be the human one. The path ahead was no longer about containing a crisis. It was about preparing for a war and deciding who would fight it by his side. Yi-won presented Amara with a choice, but it was no choice at all. Disappear into a new identity, safe but alone, or stand beside him and become a player in a game where the rules were written in blood and code. She didn't hesitate. "I'm already in the room, remember," she said. So he opened the room to her. He showed her the secure operations center beneath his penthouse, a hive of monitors and analysts. He introduced her to Min-soo, not as staff, but as an ally. He laid out the dossier on Victor Chen, a man without a country, whose business was trading in other people's secrets and sorrows. Chen saw Amara as a lever. Yi-won's plan was to let him think he was right. They would dangle the lever, and when Chen grabbed for it, they would break his hand. The bait was a public appearance. Yi-won, famously reclusive, would attend a high-profile charity gala for the arts. Amara would be his guest. The story, leaked to a society blog, was that the reclusive billionaire had found inspiration in a brilliant, rising star of the illustration world. It was a narrative of patronage and romance, just shallow enough for someone like Chen to believe. The night of the gala, Amara wore a gown the color of midnight, feeling like an imposter until she saw the look in Yi-won's eyes when he saw her. It wasn't possession. It was awe. He offered her his arm, and for the first time, his touch was not calculating but anchoring. They walked into the glittering crowd, and the trap was set. Chen took the bait, but not in the way they expected. He didn't send a thug or make a threat. He sent a woman, an elegant, sharp-faced gallery owner named Alara, who glided up to Amara while Yi-won was pulled into a conversation with a senator. Alara praised Amara's work with a connoisseur's eye, then slipped a small, encrypted data drive into her clutch. "A token from an admirer," she whispered. "Consider it in advance. My client wishes to commission a very private, very lucrative piece. The subject matter is sensitive. He believes you have a unique understanding of hidden truths." The drive, when decrypted later, contained not a threat but a job offer, a massive sum to create a series of illustrations based on private, devastating emails and documents that detailed a competitor's industrial espionage. The competitor was one of Yi-won's few legitimate allies in Asia. The documents were real. Chen wasn't trying to kidnap Amara. He was trying to recruit her, to make her an unwitting weapon in a corporate war, and in doing so, either turn her against Yi-won or force Yi-won to destroy her to protect his ally. It was a more elegant, more vicious play. Amara stared at the decrypted files in Yi-won's operations center. She felt sick. "He wants me to be the artist of someone's ruin." Yi-won's jaw was tight. "He wants to see what you are made of. Will you choose money over morality? Will I choose my business over you?" The test was for both of them. Amara's initial terror solidified into a cold, clear rage. She had been a pawn for too long for Darnell, for clients like Leo, and now for a global predator. She looked at Yi-won. "We don't refuse the commission, we accept it." Yi-won's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "I'm an illustrator. I tell stories with images, so we give him a story. We use his own data to tell a different truth." A plan formed, born of her artistry and his resources. They would create the illustrations Chen requested, but they would embed a counter-narrative within them. Using steganography and visual cues only someone with Yi-won's decryption keys could read, the artwork would tell the story of Victor Chen's own treachery, his manipulation, his crimes. They would hand Chen the knife, but the handle would be coated in a poison only he would touch. The next 2 weeks were a frenetic, clandestine collaboration. Amara worked in a secure studio, her new, gifted tools finally being used for the purpose they were meant for, creating truth. Yi-won and his team fed her the real data on Chen, the shell companies, the blackmail, the ruined lives. She wove it into the illustrations, hiding it in the patterns of wallpaper, the text of fake letters in the background, the reflection in a character's eye. The final pieces were stunning and damning, a masterpiece of double meaning. They delivered the files electronically, along with a request for the second half of the payment. Chen's response was immediate. He was pleased. The trap was set on both sides. The detonation happened at an auction house in Geneva. Chen, using a proxy, put the illustrations up for sale to his target, the competitor, as a form of psychological warfare. The competitor's security team, tipped off by Yi-Wan, acquired the digital files and subjected them to a level of analysis Chen had never anticipated. The hidden data was extracted, but Yi-Wan didn't just leak it to the competitor. He packaged the decrypted narrative, Chen's own crimes illustrated by his own hired artist, and sent it to 6 financial regulatory bodies, 3 intelligence agencies, and the board of the shell corporation that was Chen's last legitimate front. The unraveling was swift and public. Chen's assets were frozen, his travel flagged. His network, seeing the meticulous artistic proof of his betrayal, began to disintegrate. He wasn't arrested, he was erased from the world he ruled. The final report stated he was last seen boarding a private jet to a country with no extradition treaty, a man stripped of his power, fleeing the ghosts in his own portrait. In the quiet aftermath, Yi-Wan and Amara stood on his balcony, the city sprawling below them. The war was over. The system error, as Yi-Wan would say, had been corrected, but the people in the system were changed. Yi-Wan looked at Amara not as a problem to be solved or a debt to be repaid, but as the woman who had looked into the abyss with him and hadn't flinched. "I built an empire on predicting the worst in people," he said, his voice rough. You operate on a principle I had cataloged as inefficient, kindness, and it has been the most destabilizing, powerful force I have ever encountered." Amara leaned into him, the warmth of his body a solid reality against the cool night. "It wasn't just kindness," she said. "It was seeing a person, not a transaction. You lost a coat. I found a person. You saw someone being crushed. I saw a person who could fight back if someone handed her the right tool." She paused. "We saved each other," Yi-Wan, "from different kinds of prisons." A year later, the gallery opening was a sensation. The exhibition was titled "The Currency of Conscience," a series of Amara's illustrations exploring connection, power, and vulnerability in the digital age. The art world buzzed about the brilliant new voice. Few knew that the show's anonymous benefactor was the reclusive Yi-Wan Kim. Even fewer knew that one piece, a stunning digital triptych titled "Found Objects," held a secret. In the first panel, a detailed charcoal overcoat lay on a rain-drenched bench. In the second, the coat was held by 2 sets of hands, one dark, one light, not quite touching. In the third, the coat was woven into the fabric of a glittering cityscape, its threads becoming data streams and streetlights. Embedded in the artwork's code, accessible only by a QR code Yi-Wan kept on his own phone, was the original text exchange from that rainy night. It was their origin story, encrypted in beauty. After the crowds left, they stood before the triptych. Yi-Wan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black velvet box. He didn't get down on one knee. He simply opened it, revealing a ring, a single, perfect emerald set between 2 bands of brushed platinum. "The green is for the first thing I ever truly noticed about you after the rain," he said. "The life in your eyes when you refused to be intimidated." He took a breath, the man of infinite words suddenly struggling. "My life was a closed loop, a perfect, sterile circuit. You were an unexpected input. You broke the loop and started a new program. One I want to run with you indefinitely. Marry me." Tears streamed down Amara's face, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "1,000 times yes." As he slid the ring onto her finger, she remembered the feel of his damp coat over her arm, the cold brush of his fingers. She had thought she was just returning lost property. She had no idea she was setting in motion a chain of events that would dismantle empires, heal ancient wounds, and rewrite 2 lonely stories into one epic of redemption and love. The jacket had been returned, but in its place, they had found each other. So what is the true value of a single act of honesty? In a world measured in data points and profit margins, the story of Amara and Yi-Wan suggests an answer we often forget. It is immeasurable. It is infinite. Amara returned a coat, but what she really triggered was a cascade. She disrupted a billionaire's sterile, controlled universe with an input his algorithms couldn't process: pure, uncompensated decency. In response, he didn't just pay her back. He rebuilt the world around her to be safer, fairer. He used his formidable power not for conquest, but for correction, healing an old wound in his own soul in the process. Their story is a modern fairy tale, yes, but it's rooted in a profound psychological truth. We consistently underestimate the impact of kindness, both in giving and receiving. Studies show that givers often have no idea how much a small act truly means to the recipient. Amara had no concept that her decision to wait in the rain would alter the trajectory of her life. Yiwon couldn't fathom that this glitch in his system would become its most vital upgrade. They operated on different currencies, conscience and control, and found that together they created a new economy of trust. It makes you wonder, how many pivotal moments do we walk past every day? The lost item we ignore, the stranger we choose not to see, the small right thing we decide is not worth our time. We think our world is built on grand plans and major decisions, but so often it's built on these micro moments of human connection. The bus stop, the park bench, the elevator, the sidewalk. Each one is a potential nexus where two stories can collide and change forever. Amara and Yiwon found that nexus. From a jacket left in the rain, they forged a partnership that toppled empires, exposed corruption, and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. He gave her security. She gave him back his humanity. They proved that the most powerful circuit isn't made of silicon, but of empathy and courage wired together. If you enjoyed this journey, this exploration of how the smallest thread of kindness can unravel the tightest knot of power, then do me a kindness in return. Take a second to subscribe to the channel. It's free, and it helps me keep telling stories like this one. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Was it the rainy meeting, the high-stakes confrontation, or the quiet moment of understanding that resonated most with you? And tell me where in the world you're listening from. Remember, you never know which moment is your bus stop. You never know which act of conscience is the one that changes everything. Live like it could be any of them. Thank you for watching.